Hi everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we're here to do the 10,000 subscriber Q&A, and I know I've been putting this off for quite a long time, so my apologies. My excuse is that I was getting my brain scanned by Dario Nardi at a personality hacker event. He told me I have a Zen brain pattern, and so I'm Miss Monk, and also the zone of my brain that lights up the most is the T6, which is known as the insightful futurist, which is basically the brain area that symbolizes introverted intuition. And so I'm going to have a full video with Dario sometime disclosing the brain scan results. Now I'm here with Carol today, and she's going to be asking me some of your questions. She is also the president of the Association of Psychological Type, and they're holding a conference that I will be speaking at, and it'll be on July 29th. The topic is personalities in relationship. And so if you want to see some of that goodness, I'll have it linked below. And so, Carol, I'll let you interrogate me now.
Okay. So what drew you to pursue learning about psychological type in particular?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Carol. Ever since the moment I could think, I knew I was fundamentally different than the people around me. I knew I perceived things differently on a very core level, and I could never pinpoint what it was. And so I went to psychologist to psychologist to psychologist to see what it was, because I knew I was seeing something real, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was. And it made me feel like, as you, Carol, described, the ugly duckling. And so I didn't know where that came from. And so I wondered if I was gifted, an indigo child, or autistic, or something. And nothing came up when I went to the psychologists or the counselors or the therapists. They couldn't find anything. So I was like...
You know why they couldn't find anything? Because there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah, so I find a lot of intuitives or people who have dealt with a lot of trauma in their life wonder, what is wrong with me? When really there is nothing intrinsically wrong with you or fundamentally wrong with you. You're just fundamentally different. You're not fundamentally wrong.
And if you have an intuiting, whether it's introverted or extroverted, if you have a preference for that perceiving one of those two perceiving functions, then you're seeing things and paying attention to things that other people aren't. And it can make you doubt yourself when you're young because you're thinking, why is nobody else talking about this? And feel like that fairy tale where the little boy, the emperor has no clothes and the little boy's by the side of the road and he can see the emperor's wearing no clothes and everyone else is talking about the gorgeous wardrobe the emperor is wearing. And I feel like the little boy is the intuitive in the crowd going, there are no clothes. And everyone else is pretending they can see the clothes because they don't want to pretend they're not smart enough to see the clothes. Yes, we can feel different and odd man out because, especially when we're kids, because we're seeing and paying attention to things other people aren't.
Exactly. And it can make you feel a little bit crazy or gaslighted.
Yes.
When people aren't validating my reality. It's almost like they don't see what I'm seeing.
Right.
And on some level, they actually aren't. And so you realize that if you have a really heavy abstract preference, if people around you are very concrete and they haven't developed that abstract preference in themselves yet, then it actually appears as if that doesn't exist to them. Right. And so you go your whole life being an anomaly to your parents or to close loved ones, and you love them, but you notice that there's something there that is different. And so typology helped me scratch that itch that I knew existed. Of course, any person can feel fundamentally different than their surroundings as long as you're the minority in the situation. So in my case, I was the minority with an ESFP mother and an ISTJ dad. And so type provided a lot of clarity there. Yeah, and it made me feel not crazy and that it was okay to be me.
That's right. It turned a light bulb on that said, hey, you're not crazy. This is real, what you're seeing.
Yeah.
So I love this question because I think there's some real truth in this question. Are there some types that show up more often than others in your life, whether it's your work life or among your friends?
So my answer to that is ENFPs. They have been present throughout my entire life. And actually, the person who introduced me to typology was an ENFP. and she was obsessed with it. So everyone in our friend group knows about type, and they also have an idea of what their type preferences are too. That's how prolific it was in my life. It's the most enduring hobby I've ever had. And so with my ENFP, we would discuss philosophy or heart-to-heart topics or life or existence together, and also psychological type. And so it was a really nice bonding activity, but it helped give a language to something that was really core to our lives. So it's almost like when you see the color purple, you can't unsee the color purple. Once you've been bit by the bug, it's hard to get unbit by the bug. And so type has been this beautiful discovery. And there's that NE dominant and NI dominant attraction. Yeah. And so I find, because ENFPs know when things resonate, sometimes they can tell by the vibe of something that they appreciate someone. And so they may not have all the details about the person, but they can get a gist or a gestalt of the human being by feeling their aura. And so my ENFP friend was like, I felt her aura and I loved it. And so when ENFPs feel like they love something, they jump all in. So if they actually truly care. And so it's sweet. Whereas I think ENTPs might also have an attraction, but I find that they don't have that same level of resonance and passionate jumping in that my ENFP friends have had in my life. So now I'm surrounded a little bit more with ENTPs. But yeah, NE dominants are what have pervaded my life.
Well, this leads into the very next question. What do you think about the various theories on which types are drawn to each other? For example, there's John Beebe's theory that NE DOMs are drawn to NI DOMs and SI DOMs to SE DOMs, etc. And attracted, we're not just talking about sexual attraction. That can be a part of it, but just attracted in general. There seems to be a kind of magnetism between people whose one person's dominant is the other person's fifth function, and vice versa. What's your experience with that? An opinion on that?
I do think that exists because there's a draw in us to self-actualize. And so when someone else has the other flip coin of the intuition, it's enticing because it's what you value, but in a different orientation. And so it's almost like you build on each other's idea. For instance, with the ENFP, they'll go broad and they have a wide aperture of ideas. And they're like, wow, I am researching all these things and I can make all these desperate connections. And the INFJ kind of drills into that idea, that one idea. And so they make a really good combo of both depth and breadth together, and they help challenge each other and grow each other. The NE and I combo is interesting because NE dominants tend to have an inherent optimism to them. And so they really do provide this enthusiasm and playfulness with their ideas. And I find when they meet an NI dom, they're like, oh, this NI dom's ideas is delicious. It's just delicious, as in it's almost tasty to eat the idea of someone who's really thought through something. It's like, oh, wow, I've never thought of that before. Whereas the NE dominant is usually the one that people say to them, oh, I've never thought of what you said before. But with the NE dom to the NI dom, they say, I've never thought of that angle before. And so it's this being able to enrich each other through offering different perspectives on the meaning behind something. It's really great.
I think it's real too. I mean, I heard BB teach it in person about 10 years ago, and ENFP preferences, the types he'd be talking about for me are INFJ and INTJ. And those are the two least frequent types on the type chart, are INFJ and INTJ. And they're all over my life and have been for decades. So it cannot be an accident that I keep finding the least common people on the type chart all in my life. So BB set off a light bulb in my head that day, and I think there's something going on there too. So when you first figured out that INFJ was, and actually you have a funny story about your ENFP friend that you might want to tell here too that I know. But when you first found out that INFJ was your best fit pattern, what was your reaction to that?
Yeah. So it was in grade 9. My ENFP best friend loves to search up these esoteric theories. And so one day it'll be about the kibby fashion and about the different kinds of fashion that fit people's different body types. The other day it'll be a different theory, and another day it'll be another kind of theory that she's into. Unless a theory has a gravitational pull, and then she'll actually be enamored by that. And psychological type was something that she stuck with.
Right.
And it was something that she introduced to all her friends, me included. And so she kind of gave us her thoughts on everyone's type. In the sense, I know that's unethical, but we were little kids, so I think we got a little bit of a pass there.
Well, let's clear up what's considered unethical in the professional practice of it is you don't tell somebody else what they are. You bring information and you answer their questions and you help them come to their own realization because they know more about themselves than you do. But yes, I think it's okay for little kids to tell each other what they are.
Yeah. And so with my ENFP friend, her name was Gorbia, she told me, oh yeah, you could figure out what your type is and you could take an online test, but online tests could be wrong. I already know your type. And if you think you're anything different, you're wrong.
That's not allowed with you as a professional going forward, right? We're real clear about that, but that's cute that she said that.
Yeah, and it was actually a term of endearment. She was trying to say, I know you better than you know yourself. Not in an arrogant way, but it's just, I think when someone loves you, they're like, I know you so well. I spent extra time looking at you and paying attention to you. So I'm aware of your responses to things. So I'm aware that you are more of this. It was actually an act of love, but said a little bit unskillfully. And so she was actually right. I would have typed myself that way anyways. And it was interesting the level of conviction she had, and I would ask her her reasoning and she would explain it to me. And it actually was very in-depth and thorough. And I was actually very sold by how elegantly she was able to explain to me exactly why she thought I was an INFJ. And that actually made a lot of my life make sense. And it was like everything clicked at that moment. And I was like, that is why I've felt so different. From a young age, I had a lot of adults telling me I was an old soul because I was so wise without experience. It's like, how do you know all these things in terms of life lessons and deep thought at such a young age without having tried anything? And so I've always been a kind of out of this world soul. I wouldn't say necessarily old soul because that implies like people might associate that with practicalness. And I'm not a practical old soul. I suck at practicality. But I am an old soul in the sense that it almost feels like I identify more with my spiritual being, or that the part of me that has thoughts about things and is able to discern into things than just practical everyday existence. Like what I'm more drawn to is getting to the deep meaning of something and looking past what it actually is to see what it actually means from ever since I could think. And so it was really eye-opening why everything in my life happened. It finally drew the through line of my life. And I love psychology, right? So typology is a form of guessing into a person's mind. It's the starting place for deep conversation. So type is the exoskeleton, and you fill it in with the individual's idiosyncrasies, but it's a great overall structure. It's a great overall map, even if it doesn't tell you the territory of someone. It is actually very profound, and it was very life-changing. And once you can name something, you can claim it. So once you figure out what something actually is, you can own it, and you can give yourself permission to wear it without the unnecessary shame. Of course, you can improve yourself. So you can start to individuate and grow different sides of yourself that may not be as natural, but it gives you this base acceptance of your foundation. I think type gives you this acceptance at your core in a way that I haven't found anywhere else.
Part of what the gift your friend gave you was a language to talk about it, because once you have a language you can see it and discover more, and then you can even delve into it more. But until you have a way to talk about it, it's really hard to do deep discovery with it. So Very cool, that gift she brought to your life. So what do you like about being INFJ type pattern? What's your favorite things about having your preferences?
Good question. And so it's the insight and foresight and discernment that it allows you. So
Joyce, I have read that people tend to, when asked, and I haven't done this research myself, so I don't know, but I have read from someone I trusted that people tend to like their own type preferences. And when given a choice, they don't want to be another set of type preferences. They really like what their preferences are. And only one time in 20 years of practice, only once have I had a client who didn't like his preferences. He felt like his preferences were boring and not interesting enough, and that nobody would want to be his preferences. And I just, my jaw just dropped. It broke my heart that he didn't like what his preferences were. It's like he wasn't as good as he wanted to be about something. And I didn't have a really good answer for it except to try to start outlining all the wonderful strengths he brought to the table. But I have honestly only run into that once in 20 years, somebody not really preferring their own and loving their own type preferences.
yeah, and I find when people don't like their type preferences, it's because of the stereotypes with the type. It's not because of the type itself.
Yeah.
It's just how people talk about the type. And so if we change the dialogue around a type, then it makes people want to embrace their type even more. Because at their core, all types are equal. Even if we might have better or worse experiences with a certain type, it is good to embrace your type. And you're right that most people do end up liking their type.
And
Yeah.
that's a great insight I hadn't had. You're right. What he was upset about were some of the negative stereotypes said about his preferences. I didn't notice that before, but I think you're exactly right. And my version of that is a well-developed INFJ is a beautiful thing, and an underdeveloped INFJ is not a beautiful thing. And a well-developed ISTJ preference person is a beautiful thing, and a less well-developed ISTJ version of a person is not quite such a beautiful thing. So it's really about how developed we are and how elegantly we use our preferences and how well we deal with our own blind spots, because no type is better than another one. We just can show up better as our best selves when we've done some more learning and when we're not quite so hung up in our own blind spots.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. So any mature and healthy version of any type is wonderful.
So I really love this question that came from your folks. Sometimes someone with an intuitive, introvert intuition dominant sees a train wreck coming in a situation. Well, oftentimes other people around you, one, they don't see the train wreck, and two, they're not at all happy about the fact that you see a train wreck, and they can be unhappy with you for being, I think, what my generation would call a Debbie Downer, and that you're being negative about it and put up some resistance. So, have you ever run into this problem of you seeing the negative situation you see is going to fall on all of our heads, and the other people don't see it and don't want to see it?
Yeah, I do find that it comes quite natural to me to think about how things will turn out and how things will go. And if you illustrate this with an ENFP and INFJ dynamic, ENFPs, they love to give people second chances and give people benefit of the doubt. And so, like, let's say an INFJ, like me, might notice a possible train wreck with an ENFP and someone they're giving benefit of the doubt.
Oh, no, I've never had this happen, Joyce, not ever.
And so I might try to tell the ENFP,
Right.
but the thing is, I don't share the entirety of what I think. I might have it, but I just share with them how I don't think it's a good idea. And what will happen is ENFPs will listen as long as they know why you think a certain thing. But if you're not giving them a good enough why, they want to give that other person the benefit of the doubt because you haven't substantiated yet that it's better to not follow through with that thing.
For an ENFP, it's for me having these preferences. It's like that's not me being a good person to not give them. That everyone deserves the benefit of the doubt by virtue of being a person, and I'm not doing right by them if I don't give them the benefit of the doubt. And that has bitten me more times than I can count in my youth. You're exactly right. And my mother is somebody who could tell you about all the times I gave somebody another benefit of the doubt and it was not a good idea. So yes, I needed an INFJ friend whispering in my ear and telling me the whys.
Yeah, that would have been nice.
Okay, this next part, we've got several questions in a row, and the topic is all around a career in psychological type. And that makes sense to me that people who are watching your channel might have interest like this. So let's go with the first one. Are there some books or other kinds of resources on psychological type that you'd like to recommend to your subscribers? And are there any courses you might like to recommend they take? Knowing that this is not going to be an exhaustive list, this is just you throwing out a few things. What recommendations would you like to make today?
Good question, Carol. One of the books that I would recommend to people learning about the cognitive functions is The Building Blocks of Personality Type by Mark Hunziker that Carol has shown on screen. It provides really clear bullet-pointed lists, especially for those extroverted thinking using folk who love the executive summary of something to just read through. And it offers a really good look into the functions in a very clear way. It may not be perfect, like no book is perfect out there, but it's a really good, substantial place to look at. And a book that really captivated me into reading typology books was Personality Types and Owner's Manual by Lenore Thompson. This is an extremely in-depth read into the types and her hypothesis into what brain regions those correlate with. Now, it may not line up with the research on brain science and type perfectly, but it's a really interesting hypothesis for each of the brain regions, and it's so well written. This book is extraordinary, so I would highly recommend it. It's written by an INTJ, and so is The Building Blocks of Personality Type. And if you're looking into the 8 function model, I would recommend this book by Carol Shoemate. It's called Projection and Personality Development via the 8 function model. And it takes John Beebe's work and it makes it very clear and digestible. So it's written by a professor who is teaching people who are graduating from depth Jungian psychology. And so highly recommend. And another book I would recommend too are Linda Barron's books. This is her cognitive function book here. And so she provides different lenses on personality type. And so temperament theory, if you've read Kiersey's Please Understand Me, she actually offers an expansion pack on that and makes it her own thing by adding her own spin on it and being able to flesh it out even more. It provides you more ways to look at type, whereas I feel like the more tools you have in your toolbox, the more colorful your type life becomes. She also teaches about interaction styles, which is how the different types tend to interact with one another too. Yeah, so it is a new look on type, especially for enthusiasts who are looking for another angle of type. And if you're looking for another way to understand type more deeply, I would recommend Linda's books too.
It's based on social style, so it's actually coming at it from a different angle than type, but it's very compatible. She looked at social styles and thought, why does the type model not mesh well with the social styles model? And then she studied it and figured out why. So she created her own. DISC, for example, is a famous example of social styles. Can we, and I find it invaluable to use interaction styles together with type. It really adds another dimension. Can we mention, please, the description for self-discovery?
Yeah, so Linda Barron's also has whole type descriptions as well, and they're really good profiles. She actually interviewed people of the types to create them because it was her belief that to be accurate, you actually have to talk to the people of those types. So yeah, check out those books if you haven't already.
So this one in particular, I used it for years in classes. I would teach modules of learning, and then I would go through the book and I would put a yellow sticky on a couple of pages, and I would use where they were in interaction style and essential motivators, and say just read the little snapshot and tell me what you think. And this is just invaluable if you're going to do this professionally, to help it can just speed up the process and help people get to a place where they find their home more quickly. And that's very reassuring to people, and it helps get them there. And it's not you telling them what they are, it's you giving them choices. So absolutely, I would not go out to a client meeting without this book.
That book has many gems, and one of them is there are 2-word titles for each of the types, and they're actually how the type sees themselves, and the next word is how other people tend to see that type. And so it gives you that 360 angle too. For instance, Carol's gonna show something.
Well, you just made me think of that. Let me do yours first. Okay, yours says foreseer developer. Does that resonate with you?
It does. And so I might be misquoting Linda, but the foreseer is how the INFJ sees themselves, and the developer is how other people see the INFJ. So it's just...
So mine is discoverer advocate. Oh yeah, that's just me in a nutshell. I totally get Linda's onto something here.
Very cool.
Okay. Is there anything else before we go on to the next question?
Yeah, when it comes to training programs, so each training program has something different that it offers. The official MBTI master certification is good if you want to roll it out in organizations and have some sort of credential that people recognize off the bat. Whereas a certification like Personality Hacker is really good if you want a summer camp experience of community of type. You'll meet a really good, warm, welcoming community there and make lifetime friends over at their certification. Linda Behrens, she offers an in-depth look into the interaction styles and essential motivators, which is temperament theory. And so if you want a new nuanced way to look at type, I would say look there. And you'll also have a Zoom community there as well. And there's also Type Coach, which I'm a part of as well. That's right. And they're a great place to actually roll out typology in an organization. So they use temperament theory and type to explain in a simple way that people will get off the bat. And so a majority of people in organizations are SJs, and the program was actually made by an ESTJ preference and also an ENTP preference co-founders. Mm-hmm. And so because they have a stabilizer, which is someone who has the S and J preference in the Myers-Briggs letter code, they actually know how to roll out the program in a very clear way that is very accessible. So they have the most SJ practitioners that I've seen in a program. They're very helpful for giving the stress angle on type and the coaching and the innovation and the change angle and the conflict one on typology. So it really depends on what you're looking for. The different type programs offer different pros to them. So
very cool. I'm sure people find it very useful. Thank you. And you have really made the rounds. And I've studied with all 3 of these groups too. So good for you. And
I've studied with everyone in the type sphere. There's almost everyone in the type sphere.
So someone is asking, how did you get started in your career? Did you take courses? Did you have well, we know you've taken a lot of courses now. Did you have a mentor? What would you like to say to people about how you got started doing this as your work?
You could say that I got started the moment that I was obsessed with type. I just never found the confidence to act in it. That was 12 years ago. Now, my first professional certification was in the official MBTI, and I started coaching over YouTube, and that was when a majority of my career started. So it was during the pandemic, actually. They were doing layoffs at my workplace, and so I thought, what better way to spend my time but to talk to a camera on YouTube? And I've always wanted more typology friends, so the reason why I created a channel was I wanted to get over my social anxiety, and I wanted to make more friends who are into typology. And I wanted to make my presence in the type world because I loved it so much that I wanted to be a part of it in a more involved way. It was a way of me letting down my walls. So to go back to the ENFP and INFJ dynamic we were talking about earlier, I find ENFPs, when they love something and they care about something and they're passionate about something, they jump all in, as we talked about. Whereas INFJs, when they learn to trust someone, they have many walls and they just take one wall off first. And then when they trust you more, they take off another wall and another wall. But it's an incremental layer to get closer. And it's almost like a clam. So INFJs require a little bit of that prying open because they're naturally very reserved or even restrained or private people. And so they require someone to really push down those walls, or they have to proactively work at bringing down their walls. And so in a way, being involved in the type sphere was a way of me opening up my clam shell and allowing that pearl to show to the world so that I could have a dialogue with the community. And so oftentimes I don't know if my thoughts have any impact on people because our insights come so naturally to us. We wonder, oh, it kind of feels like it's nothing new because it's just stuff that you've already thought about. But other people might be very impacted by it. It might be life-changing for them. It might elevate them to another level. And so I found that even if you find your insight to be not impressive in your own eyes, it could be super impressive to another person's eyes. And so don't give up putting your voice out there because someone out there needs to hear your voice and you can make a difference. And I like to say that if you put yourself out there, someone out there might need to have heard your essence. And when you speak, even if it's not perfect in its technicalities or in its details, it's perfect in that it conveys your essence, right? Because you're always conveying your essence in whatever form it is. And someone might have need to have felt it or heard it or listened to it. And so you were that key to making someone feel seen and heard. And so don't underestimate your impacts, because if you grow up with parents who have a very different worldview than you, they don't value the things that you have to say. You're a very acquired taste. Like some people really like your insights and some people are like, why are you thinking so much? And so I've learned to value my own voice through the process of opening up a YouTube channel. And that was the inception of a lot of other things too.
Actually, that's a great question here. So you have put, and that leads, your answer leads into it. So you've clearly put a lot of work into your YouTube channel, Joyce. So what do you most hope to accomplish with it? And over time, has your purpose or main goal changed?
What I hope to accomplish with it is making the types feel seen and heard in their own words. And so just like with a native Indian or an Aboriginal person, if you speak on behalf of them without knowing their experience, you're going to get something off.
Yeah.
And so if you let the Aboriginal person speak for themselves, you're able to capture the complexity around their actual phenomenon as a human being. And so in the same way, I hope that Type Talks is able to give a voice to types so that they can say their piece, they can go on their soapbox, and that they can also represent themselves in their full complexity and nuance. And so my hope for my channel was for it to be something akin to Humans of New York, which, if you know about that, they basically collect stories of people that are really heartfelt, and they help you get to know the human experience better. And so I hope through this channel that people were able to hear the stories of real people and be impacted in a deep way. Because we can talk type on a theoretical level all day. I think it adds a 4D level to be able to hear people's experiences. And especially intuitives might feel really energized by the conceptual talk. So it's also nice to bring it down to some form of getting to know actual people and bring it down to the sensory. And so that people actually get to see real life examples. And so we're able to actually see type as they are. Like I appreciated Linda Barron's approach of talking to the people of the types when she created her books. And so in a sense, I'm trying to create a real in-life version of it. There is a big picture to this. So I plan on writing books on each of the 16 types. I'm writing the ENFP book with Carol right now that we're going to publish sometime, and I'll announce it to the audience when it's out. But the goal of it is to really allow you to feel how it's like to be a type inside out. And so it can enhance your empathy and compassion for the different types. And another big long-term goal is I want to show that I've done the groundwork of talking to people of all the types. And so when I boil it down into something that I may release, like if I end up doing a scientific study in the future, or if I end up publishing something in the future, that you can see that I did the work. that I'm not just theorizing it, which is an easier thing for me to do, but it's actually, I put blood, sweat, and tears into the thing that I love. This is to show the work that I actually tried to get to know each of the types.
Well, and what I love, Joyce, is about both your approach and Linda Barron's approach. Her approach when she teaches and in the book of the descriptions, like they interviewed 4 to 6 people of each of the 16 types to create. I mean, think about how many interviews that was. That was a lot of work. Linda said she's glad she did that book. She'll never get the money out of it because it took so much time to do. But it's very much in alignment with Isabel Briggs Myers' ethics, which is the person who is the expert on their preferences is that person, not the type expert or the person coaching or teaching the workshop. And you having those panels the way you do, like having one of each of the 4 get things going interaction styles, or one of each of the 4 of a given temperament, that is the essence of what Isabel's ethical dimensions are about using types. So you are in a very good lineage here, dear, of doing it the right way and showing respect for people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad to be here. Okay, so here's something. I wonder if you've run into this. I've certainly run into this as a type practitioner. Someone asked, so what are your thoughts on some people feeling boxed in by the label of a particular Myers-Briggs type? And have you experienced that as a practitioner? People say, oh, don't put me in a box. Don't define me.
Yeah, and it's primarily people who don't actually know about the theory. So they think that if they're an extrovert, they can't have any part of them that's introverted. But actually, if they learn about the cognitive functions, they realize that they're both things. It's yes and, it's not either or. And so type becomes more fluid when you realize that it's not trying to tell you that you can only be one thing. It does tell you your starting place. So if you're ENFP, there are certain things that may come easier to you, but that's not where you end. And so you can develop infinitely, but type tells you where is most natural for you if you were just to look at your innate preferences. And so it's not a box, just like being male or female or even non-binary is not a box, because they do tell you something about you. No one says it's boxing me in to be those 3 things. And the reason why is because you know you're more than your gender, you know you're more than your sex. So just like right-handed people know they're more than their right hand, you are more than your personality type. But also your personality type is very, very real. And so it's not a box, just like being right-handed is not a box. It is a way to capture very complex phenomenon into a very succinct way. And it's a study of the human mind. It's beautiful because it's one of the most noble pursuits, which is looking into understanding people better, more holistically, and with more tools. So type is not a box, it's a tool to understand phenomenon more clearly. And so would you never learn about the law of gravity just because it boxes you in that the fact that gravity exists? No, you would still learn about gravity because it affects you. And if you deny type, then it's still affecting you. So it's still there.
Whether you admit it exists or not, it is still freaking there. I love that, Joyce. Okay. When a client appears to be struggling with which type pattern is their best fit, what do you find helps them most to get clear about what their preferences are?
When a person is struggling the most with their best fit type, I would recommend triangulation. So looking at many data points. Nothing is the sole arbitrator to what your type is. You're actually on a self-discovery journey, and you're looking to get a more holistic view of yourself. So I would say take everything with a grain of salt and then look at it holistically and see what fits best. And one of the tools you can use to do that is Linda Barron's whole type descriptions. Another one is looking at other reputable places for how they view type 2 and comparing yourself against that. I understand that stereotypes can make it hard to type yourself because you may be a certain type, but you may not fit within the stereotypes. So that can make it difficult for people to find their best fit type. But I would say get as many different vantage points on your type from credible sources as you can, such as doing a honest self-inventory of yourself and also seeing how other people see you in your close life, because it might give you an insight you have not considered yet. But no one is the word of God, and ultimately, when it comes to figuring out your type, it requires you to do the research into the functions. You can look at interaction style, you can look at essential motivators, which is temperament, and you can look at different viewpoints to see what clicks. And so tests might be an easy way for people to first start out, but it's a starting point and it's not an end place. And so I would say the best way for a person to figure out their type is to extend their type journey beyond what Disney princess are you kind of questionnaires.
Well said. Okay, and even if you take one of the official validated instruments, and I certainly hope you take an instrument that's got some oomph behind it and not something that doesn't have any research behind it. But even if you take one of the validated instruments, it is still just a starting point, because you're the decider of what your preferences are. Don't ever let the report tell you what you are. The report's a starting point for self-discovery. So thank you, Joyce, for
Yeah. I will say the official instrument may be a little more accurate than 16 Personalities. So 16 Personalities is the most used website for people because it's cute, so people are drawn to it. Whereas 60% of people who take a test there score INFJ. Whereas if you take the official test, yeah, it's true, Carol.
That's horrifying, though. That is just horrifying.
It's horrifying. And on the official MBTI, 1 to 3% of people score INFJ.
Right.
So that's why when you ask anyone around you what type they are, they say INFJ. It's because of 16 personalities. And then everyone calls it the MBTI, but it's really 16 personalities. Because it's very hard to score INFJ on the MBTI. But I'm not saying the official MBTI can get your type wrong, but it's not as wrong as 16 personalities. They're different levels of wrong.
There are different levels of wrongness. I love that. Okay, that's great. Now we're going in a slightly different direction. How do you think neurodivergence affects type? And what could you say to people who are trying to help people professionally type themselves, and how might that get in the way of their helping someone determine their true core preferences?
Absolutely. And so if you look at ADHD, if you have a type like, let's say, for example, an ENTJ who has ADHD, they might actually test out on instruments as an ENTP or along the lines of having perceiving preferences. And so that's one of the many ways neurodivergence can cause you to test out of preference. Now, I'll create a whole separate video on this just because there's so much to cover here.
Right.
I tend to find neurodivergence is such a broad term used by millennials now that it's actually used to encompass people who just think differently than other people. And so in a way, if you're a type in the minority, you are technically neurodivergent in that context. So in a way, your MBTI type is one of the many ways you are neurodivergent, because you are actually different in neurology. You have different neural pathways, or you use your brain differently than the other people around you. So yeah, that can affect your type journey, because you might be like me. You might have looked for the reason why your neurology was so different than other people, only to realize that it was because you were the sole one type of that type in a place that had none of that type. And so that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, dear, very much. Okay. We also know, I'm excited we're going in this direction too. We also know that you're certified in the Enneagram. Are there any common combinations of Enneagram? And knowing this is a huge topic, okay, are there some common matchups between Enneagram and type preferences that you frequently encounter that you'd like to talk about?
Absolutely. And so any dominants such as the ENFP and the ENTP tend to be Enneagram 7s.
Guilty.
Exactly. And INFPs and ISFPs tend to be 4s or 9s. And there are a lot of correlations. They're actually quite strong. But you can be a weird Enneagram type with a MBTI type. I don't want to exclude any type combinations from being possible, but there are clear trends. And so INTJs tend to be Enneagram 5s or Enneagram 1s. But yeah, this is a complex topic, so I'll make another video covering this in detail.
Okay, we've got 2 more questions. I'm excited we've gotten here too. So what concerns you about the type community today, and what hopes do you have for it moving forward and in the future?
Because there are so many type resources online, there's a lot of noise out there. A lot of the bad resources are overlapped with a lot of the good resources. So it's hard to know what is what for the average consumer who's just gone into typology. So that's why I love the Association of Psychological Type, because they're committed to the ethics of typology and helping people know what those ethics are so that they can separate the noise from the nutrition, so of the substance in type. And so teachers of type like Joel and Antonia of Personality Hacker or Linda Behrens or other typology schools of thought offer really good information on type. And some places don't. Type is a tool for love, and we can use it to better our relationships, better our lives, and for personal growth and to reach your human potential. And you can actually use it to accidentally put people in boxes too. So I think as the community, if we tell people that this theory does not put people into boxes, we should practice it ethically and not put people into boxes when we practice this theory. So I think that's one of the big misuses of type. People get too pedantic about type, and then they start policing each other. And so the community almost attacks each other. And it's like an autoimmune disease where your own cells attack your own cells. And so I would just say, guys, just love each other. Don't attack each other. You can have your disagreements, but it's good for people to use this theory for good purposes and not to beat others in debates. You can. I mean, if you like debating, go ahead and debate. But don't use it to tear each other down, is what I'm saying.
Linda Behrens would call that weaponizing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isabel would be very sad to think we were sitting around weaponizing the tools she hoped would bring about world peace. That would be very sad for her.
That's because human beings tend to weaponize anything. So you see humans weaponizing everything, such as female, male. People use that to weaponize against each other, creating untrue generalizations. So it doesn't happen with just type. What we do with type is what we do with everything.
Yeah.
So
okay, we've got a last one. This is exciting too. Here we go. Using your introverted intuiting function, what do you see in the future for psychological type?
I think there's going to be a big boom in psychological type, such as you see in Korea because the K-pop stars are adopting type. So then now it's a huge cultural trend. Then the downside to that is they mostly only know dichotomies and 16 personalities because that's the most mainstream, which is something we could work on, right? If the community can create something at large that is ethical and both catchy to millennials, then we can find a replacement for 16 personalities. But I think where society is headed is the intersection between really great websites done on type are going to be rising up. Like I have a friend who's creating a website called Mind, and it's a beautiful website. It's prettier than 16 personalities. And I have a hope that it will bring us into the new era of type because it's going to make type more mainstream because the test is so user-friendly and slick. They're open to making their tool ethical too. So there are going to be more creators like that arising. Type is going to have a new wave of people who are interested in it because of that. I see the rise of subtype systems because millennials like to have type flexibility, just as there are hundreds of sexual orientation that are out there, asexual, bisexual, pansexual. Millennials like to have fine subcategories for things. And I believe that cultural trend is going to extend to type, that we're going to have a lot of subtype systeming, such as Dario Nardi / Victor Glencoe's DCNH model, dominant, creative, normalizing, harmonizing, and other theories that provide you even more subtypes beyond just 16 that allow you to more granularly, if you wanted to go down the deeper end of type. And yeah, I believe that it's going to be an arms race in typology. Whoever has the most catchiest, millennial-friendly design is going to win out in what millennials consume as what they're learning from primarily. And so I'd say for the people who have ethical processes, if they're able to combine that approach with making it user-friendly, making it fun, making it engaging, making it catchy and easy for millennials to share with one another in their friend group, then you've won the typology arms race. And so I believe that typology is going to boom, and there's going to be more fluidity in how people see their own types.
That's what I love about Dario's subtypes. I just started learning about that in the past 2 years, and it helps you see. It's like it makes it look even more valid that, oh yeah, there are like 4 different flavors of ENFP, and yes, and I've seen those different flavors, and it helps you realize, you don't have to be just alike to share some core preferences. So I'm excited that that's getting more exposure now. Well, Joyce, this has been delightful. I have learned a lot here. And I'm excited that we got to take your own audience's questions and get them laid out, and you get some answers to them.
Well, it was nice answering y'all viewers' questions, and thank you, Carol, for the wonderful hosting. And so that's a wrap. Thank you for watching Type Talks. My name is Joyce Meng, and I'll see you all in the next episode.